Oh, how frustrating. We have some beautiful bunkers here at Hawk's Nest and an abundance of sand. Our bunkers have deep, soft sand in them, and if you play them incorrectly, that's the result. So we're going to take you through the 3 big mistakes that most golfers make in these soft bunkers and show you how to avoid them. I'm Glen Haynes. Welcome to Aussie Golf Pros, where we help you make the most of your game. Our first piece of advice when playing from soft sand is to ditch the lob wedge. It typically doesn't have as much bounce as the sand wedge. And that leads us into our first mistake, is not using enough bounce. We really want to add the bounce to the shot so that we can glide out of the sand rather than digging in. What's the bounce? Well, it's that trailing edge. It's the back of the sand wedge that is lower than the leading edge. And they actually measure that, and this is 12 degrees of bounce, so that trail edge is 12 degrees lower than the leading edge. That helps the club stop digging into the sand, glides through nicely. But we can add to that, we can help that along. If we get the shaft forward, then that's reducing the amount of bounce. And if we close the club face, that's also reducing the bounce. So we can add bounce by making sure that the shaft is back a little bit. Very different to hitting from the grass, of course. And we can actually open the face a little bit if you have enough power. Square face is fine, as long as you've got plenty of bounce on the bottom of your golf club. So that's step number 1. We've got to use the bounce. If you're not using bounce, then you're going to dig into the sand and you're not going to get out of the bunker. So wiggle that feet in, nice firm solid base. Let's get that shaft back a little bit. If you want to, open the face a little, just as long as it's not closed. And let's see if we can add the bounce through the shot and get gliding through the sand rather than digging in. Comes out much freer, very different sound, and we can use that bounce through the sand so we stop digging in. The second big mistake that a lot of golfers make is getting the size of the divot wrong. Look how deep that first divot was that I made. Way too deep, way too much sand. You've got to get the depth right. When you're in soft sand, that depth really only should be about a ½ an inch, about the thickness of the sole of your shoe. And you need to practice that. Actually practice without the ball, get into a practice bunker and practice splashing the sand, using that bounce with the back of the sand wedge and get the right depth. If you can't get the right depth in the sand, you can't get a consistent result. And that's super, super important. If we're digging in too deeply, hitting down into the sand, you go too deeply in this soft sand and it just won't work. We've got to get nice and shallow, about a ½ an inch deep, about the sole of your shoe, using that bounce, and you can get out very easily out of that soft sand. So what's the third thing? Well, it's pretty simple. It's the follow through. We really need to make sure that we commit to these shots. So if you think about it, have your practice splash shot and see if you can get a few grains of sand onto the green. And that's going to really help the ball carry out onto that sand. If you're chopping down into it and quitting, even if you get the right depth of sand, even if you use the bounce, you're not going to get out because you don't have enough momentum. Soft sand is going to absorb up to 3/4 of the energy of your swing. So we really do need to have a nice long follow through. No chopping into it, no stopping. We've got to commit to it. Use the bounce, shallow splash mark, and that's nice big follow through. Look how easy that is. Because I'm using the bounce and because I'm committing to it, this is actually a very easy shot. But you've got to get the right splash mark and you've got to commit to it. So this shot's a little tougher. Remember I said earlier that you can use less loft if you have a longer shot. Well, I have a shot here around 30 yards. So sand wedge, unless you're very powerful, isn't going to make it. So you can go down to pitching wedge, which I have here. You can even go to 8-iron or 7-iron, as long as you can still get over the lip. Now, pitching wedge doesn't have quite as much bounce, that bottom of the club, quite as much bounce as the sand wedge. So we really do need to add a little bit of bounce, which means making sure that shaft is back a bit and opening the face a little bit. Add a little bit of bounce. We really have to make sure we commit to this. This is really going to help us to get that extra distance that you might not be able to achieve with the sand wedge. Still got to follow through. Comes out a bit lower and you can see there that it runs a bit more. And this is really useful for those longer shots. As I said, you can even go to 8-iron, 7-iron, as long as you can get over the lip. But in soft sand, it's actually quite easy to get the ball up fairly high with a 7 or an 8-iron. Give it a go. Remembering to rake that bunker after use. Leave the rake somewhere sensible, i.e. somewhere flat, either inside or outside the bunker, and it'll be fair for the next person. Now, if you're in firm bunker, if your sand is very thin or it's firm and compacted, then you need to play it completely differently. So watch this video next to learn how to play out of the hard sand. Now, we have our free download, as always, all the notes from today's lesson. You can download that straight to your phone and take that to your practice bunker with you. Thanks so much for watching. We look forward to your company next week. Are you the best golfer you can be?